Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov's chess channel and welcome to my Basics in Chess series. So in this series we follow opening principles, middle game strategies and the end game strategies. Today we talk about some middle game strategies again. Today we talk about a really important subject in chess, and it's the potential blockade in the middle game. So the blockade in the middle game is sort of it's a strategical element. If you don't see the potential blockade in the middle game, you're gonna probably lose the game. So the potential blockade is a must-see continuation in your middle game, because there are these common positions in which really a blockade is necessary in order to get some kind of advantage, or at least to get some kind of a counterplay in the middle game. So when is it possible to play a blockade in the middle game? There are these common positions in which these blockades are really necessary, and it's the so-called central pawn storm. So when your opponent has a very huge impact with the pawns in the center, you should block the center and try to create a blockade against some potential moves of the pawns in the center. So there are also this common position in the backward pawns. When you realize that your opponent can have a backward pawn, you should create really a blocking system against this backward pawn. And we have also the supported pass pawn situations. When your opponent is creating a supported pass pawn and you cannot do anything against it, you should create a blockade against this advanced pawn. One of the most obvious way is to play against the blockade is the so-called isolated pawn middle game. So when that happens, it's basically the best way against this isolated pawn is to create a blocking system and against this potential advance of this isolated pawn. So let's see now a couple of examples of this blocking systems, of these blockades against this common pawn structures in the middle game. So we have now this pawn storm situation in which white has really great central control with his pawns. So you see, if we don't create some kind of a blocking system, white could create really some huge advance with his pawns in the center, and that could be really deadly. So the instructive game that I wanted to show you, it was played by Glenn Fleer against the legendary Anatoly Karpov. Anatoly Karpov was really a great blocking player. Well, he played sort of a Nimtsovich style, but I think much better. Anatoly Karpov played really on this positional strategies in the middle game, and he was really one of the best positional chess players in history. And here we have a situation. You see, we have no problems because in the next move maybe white can advance even this pawn, and will then occupy the center with two pawns, which could really be deadly. Here on the fifth rank, our pieces could get restricted by this huge central pawn control. So that's why here we have to realize the center of the pawn storm. The center of the pawn storm is some kind of it's always the center of the pawn chain, and we have these pawns here on c4 and d4, and there you should really try to watch for your blocking system against this pawn. So let's see how Anatoly Karpov played on this very effective blocking system against this central pawn storm. Here after knight on g3 we have bishop on a6, attacking immediately these two pawns. So we want to crack the position around these pawns. Queen on e2 was played, and now d5. We have now c takes d5, bishop takes on d3, and now queen takes on d3, and now not to take with the pawn. You see, then we have a flexible pawn structure. Again, here we are leaving our opponent the opportunity to play the move f5. So that's why Anatoly Karpov played here. Queen takes on d5, and now we have created a blocking system against this central pawn storm. So you see, there are no good moves now for white. Okay, still he can play the move f5, but at least we have created here a certain staticity in the game, because now the c4 move is impossible. So we have now created a blocking system. We have created now a new pawn structure. Now we have the backward pawn, which I will talk about more in the continuation of this video. So we have created because we played against the pawn storm, we have created a new weakness, which is now the backward pawn. And again, we want to play this blockade against this potential advance of this c4 pawn. So this is the move we are not allowing in the continuation of the game. So that's why here queen takes on d5 when creating a very, very powerful blockade against this potential c4 move. So let's see the continuation. Castling was played, and now f5. You see again Anatoly Karpov played against with the blockade, and also preventing some f5 ideas. We have now e takes f6 with the en knight takes on f6, and you see now this this pawn structure is not mobile again. So now we really have stopped this pawn storm in the center, and we have created a very powerful blockade. Still, we want to undermine even more this central pawns with potential moves the c5. So here bishop on d2 was played. This bishop is a little bit weak now, it's blocked out by its own pawns. And here Anatoly Karpov played a very powerful move, knight on c4. Now this knight is really cemented. We have now an outpost of the knight, and that was all possible because Anatoly Karpov played first of this restriction of this potential pawn moves in the center, and now he has created a powerful blockade. Here rook on e1. Although you see Anatoly Karpov has a weakness himself, because he has now an isolated pawn. We'll talk about this isolated pawn also in the continuation of this video. So we have now this e6 weakness. So of course white is trying to play against this weakness that also Anatoly Karpov has. So you have to watch out for your own weaknesses, and also get use over your opponent's weaknesses. So here c5, very powerful move. As said, we are using the spin here by the queen on our opponent's queen. We have bishop on c1, we have c takes d4, c takes d4, and now we have created a very, very unhealthy pawn structure for white here. Now we have created two isolated pawns, which could be really, really dangerous here for white. So let's see the continuation. Rook on d8 was played, and as I always like to mention in my basics in chess series, I'm not going to explain all of these tactical possibilities. I'm not showing what happens if we move the knight here. I just wanted to show you the strategical idea of this blockade against this common pawn structures in the center. And if you don't use this blockade, you see, if Anatoly Karpov wouldn't have played this blockade against this very, very huge pawn storm that white has created, he would probably lose the game. So here rook on d1 was played. Now b5, queen on g6, we have queen on d7, now f5, and now queen on e8. Anatoly Karpov is searching for simplifications. Queen takes, rook takes on e8. Now we have f takes e6, and here rook takes on e6. And I'm not going to show you the whole game. I hope you realize that black's position is much, much better here, because in the next move we can play rook on d6 and simply play again a blockade against this isolated pawn. Now we have created another weakness, so we are creating this attack against this isolated pawn. So in the couple of moves, Anatoly Karpov was able to take this pawn and had a completely winning endgame here. So let's see now another example. Again, we have a sort of pawn storm in the center. You see white has created a very, very nice central control, has the bishop pair in the game, and that's why here is really necessary to create some kind of a blocking system against this potential advanced pawn. So of course white's idea could be to play the move c4, and then after that maybe e4, and get really, really huge central control with four advanced pawns in the center. So if we don't create this blocking system against these pawns, this could be really deadly. Then the position can get opened for the bishops, because then it's much easier to push these pawns even further and get these knights out of the defense. So that's why we have to create a blocking system against this potential c4 move, and here also this e4 move. So the instructive game that I wanted to show you, it was played by Lasker against Tchigorin, really two legends of this positional chess. Here Tchigorin played immediately c4, so we have to create a blocking system. Bishop on c2 was played, and now f5. You see, immediately playing on this blockade against this potential e4 move. Now bishop on c1 was played, rook on f7, bishop on a3, and now rook on c6. We have bishop on c5, now rook on a6. You see, there is now really a certain staticity in the game. Still, white has to prepare maybe f3 and then e4. But if this e4 move happens anyway, we of course don't want to take because that improves the position of the bishops. We are waiting our opponent to take e takes f5, and then we, after e takes f5, we have created again a blocking system. So here a4 was played. Now knight on c6. We have rook on b1, rook on d7. Here you see again we are now playing against this potential advanced pawn on d5, so we are not allowing the position to get opened. Now we are creating a blocking system against this d5 move. Knight from g to e7. It meets with the idea to really fix the knight here on e5 and creating even a more static position in the center. So you see, white doesn't have any more disadvantage of the center because this is now an immobile central pawn structure, and it's really hard for white now to create some kind of advantage in the game. Rook on b2 was played, doubling up the rooks on the b file. Now we have knight on d5, very nice move, now creating this very effective blockade. We have king on d5, knight, rook on a5, rook from g to b1, and now of course b6, kicking away the bishop. We have bishop on a3, g6, we have rook on b5, rook on a6, we have bishop on c1, knight on d8, rook on a1, here knight on f7, rook from b to b1, knight on d6, again also creating a blocking system against this potential e4 move. So we are not allowing any pawn moves in the center. f3, it's now preparing the move e4, but now knight on f7, we have rook on a3, g5. Now we want to crack the position on the flanks, undermining really this very powerful center. So that's why here king on e2 was played. But now after g takes f4, we have e4. Here knight on f6 was played, and now bishop takes on f4. We have knight on h5, bishop on e3, and now f4. And again we have created now a central static position, because now it's really hard for white to advance these pawns here on d5 or e5. If you play maybe in after of course bishop on f5, f2, if you play some kind of move like e5, then of course we are creating a blocking system while protecting this very important square here, d5. So as I said, I'm not going to show you the whole game. As said, I just want you to realize these ideas in the middle game, how to play against the pawn storms. You have to create a blocking system. If your opponent advances the pawns much further, it will be much harder to create a blocking system. So here you saw that we have created now ourselves some advanced pawns, and we are blocking out the opponent's bishop. So let's see now another example. It's gameplay by Max Juve against Herman Pilnik. Here we have the so-called supported pass pawn situation. So I said we said that we have now this we have so far solved this central pawn storm situation. Now we have the supported pass pawn, and we have to create a blocking system against this supported pass pawn. So it means we are not allowing some d6 moves, which could really be deadly here for black, which could really restrict our own pieces, so we cannot play. So you have to create this blocking system immediately, because in the next move white is also threatening to play f4 and create some kind of connected pawn storm again. White is trying to connect his pawns and get a huge central control again with his own pawns. So that's why here knight on c4 has to be played and creating a blocking system against this supported pass pawn. So we have to do that. You see, after b3, knight on d6, and now the position is much healthier here for black. We have a centralized knight, which is also creating a nice blockade against this potential d6. But we can also try some f5 pawn breakthroughs and create ourselves some kind of a counterattack here. Bishop on E3 was played. Now, of course, B6, fixing the position. Still, it's a compact position. We have, of course, the possibility to improve the position of the knight. Maybe also develop the bishop on A6, on a better diagonal. Bishop, queen on T2 was played, and now rook on E8. We have now F4. This is now this idea. Of course, you don't want to take here, because then we have G takes. G takes f4, and if this e5 move comes, then you can really resign the game immediately, because white will have a huge central control with his pawns. With this very powerful bishop, this diagonal could get opened for the bishop, so that's why we are not taking this immediately. We are creating again a blocking system here. Knight on c7 was played, here rook on f2. We have now finally e takes f4, but now after bishop takes on f4, you see, if we take now, then this is really because we have now some pinning ideas with the move f5. We can also play here knight on, or knight takes on e4, knight takes on e4, because white has lost the connection of this rook. So that's why here this moment was used by black in order to now finally release the pressure in the center. So here, after, that's why bishop on f4 was played. But now bishop on a6, we have rook on e1, and now queen on e7, again creating a blocking system now against this backward pawn. You see, this is now the idea. That's why here g4, and now bishop on e5. You see, now we're creating the blockade against this another weakness against this backward pawn. So that's why here bishop takes on e5, queen takes on e5. And as I said, I'm not going to show you the whole game now. It's a good game here for black. We have solved the problems in the center, although white has still the connected pawns in the center, but we are not allowing some advanced of these pawns. We're creating a blocking system, and we'll try to find maybe create ourselves a potential pawn breakthrough here on the queen side, using this pawn majority, this 3-on-2 situation here on the queen side. So let's see now another game. Now we have again this backward pawn situation. So of course, white's idea would be this potential d5 move. So we're not allowing these two pawns to connect here on the 5th rank. So you can pause the video and of course try to find the best move here in order to get the blockade. It's of course the move after e takes f3. We have now bishop on e6, creating a blocking system against this potential d5 move. So this is really important. We want to fix the bishop here on d5, and then continue the game with this backward pawn here, using this weakness in the continuation of the game. Here bishop on g2 was played, and here of course rook on d8, again with the same idea, to create a blockade against this d4 pawn. We have castling, and now bishop on d5, fixing the position. This is now bad bishop, which is basically a part of this pawn chain here. It's basically used just in order to defend this d4, so it's not a good bishop. Still, we have a better flexibility with our own knight to find maybe some good squares here on b3 or similar ideas. Here h4 was played, and now b5. We have c takes b6 with en passant, and now c takes b6, and now we have a new position. We have now an isolated pawn, again another weakness in our opponent's position. So that's why here it's a better middle game for black, using simply now another weakness, which is this isolated pawn. Here white tried somehow to open the position, but now knight on b4, with the idea to fix the knight here on this very active square of d3. I am not showing again the whole game. Here we have a really good position to continue from here. So because we can cement the knight, we have a very powerful centralized bishop, and if we our main idea would be maybe to get rid of this all of these pieces and simply play on this isolated pawn, which is now a new weakness, and try to take it out. Still, we have also an isolated pawn, but the difference is we can play something like a6 and then b5 and really support this pass pawn, which white cannot do in the continuation, because this is now an isolated pawn and it's a new weakness in white's position. So let's talk more about this isolated pawn. Here it's a destructive game played by Veselin Topalov against Gata Kamsky. Here we have again a very powerful central control by black, and that's why we want to immediately undermine this pawn central control here with the move c4. So Veselin Topalov played immediately to break this center of control. Here bishop on d6 was played, and now c takes d5, c takes d5, e takes d5, e takes d5, and now we have a new position. It's a simplified position now. There are maybe not so much tactical possibilities here, but we have a new weakness, and we want to create, of course, the blockade against this d5 move. So how to do that? Of course, after castling, knight on e7 was played, and now knight on f3, creating a blocking system against this d4 pawn. Although this pawn is very well protected, it's not a problem. It's not about that you can take this pawn immediately, but first we want to create a blockade, consolidate a little bit, improve the position of our pieces, and then maybe in 10-20 moves we can play much more active against this pawn, maybe take it in 10-15 moves and continue and go into a favorable endgame with one pawn up and similar ideas. So it's not, as I said, it's not about just taking this pawn. First blockade, and then after that we can maybe try some other tactical ideas. So castling here, queen on d3, you see that Veselin Topalov stays with the queen on the d file, because we want to have a very powerful blockade against this d5 move. Queen on d7 was played. Now again rook on d1, you see again with the same idea. Rook on d8, now bishop on e3. It comes now, all of these pieces are used just in order to create a blocking system against this d4 move. So a5, we have g3, h6, rook, bishop on b6, rook on c8, bishop on d4, we have bishop on c5, bishop on c3, still with the same idea, staying again with this against this potential d4 move. Bishop on b4, bishop on e5, bishop on d6, but now rook on d2, and of course with the idea to even triple the position here, creating really powerful battery on the d file, maybe with the rook, with this other rook and the queen. And here black tried bishop takes on e5, knight takes on e5, queen on d6, but now rook on e1, and now black I think has a huge problem with this d5 move, because if the position gets even more simplified, still black has troubles if we trade off all of these pieces, because in the potential endgame black will have this isolated pawn, but we have here a potential distant pass pawn situation. So if this game goes into an endgame, maybe without this knights, without this queens, without this rooks, if you could just imagine the position without these pieces on the board, white will have a better continuation here, because we have the distant pass pawn situation, and we can really create a pass pawn here ourselves and deflect the king here, because the king will be deflected to protect this maybe this a pawn from promotion, and then we can go and play with our own king simply against this pawn and take after that this pawn. So this is now from an endgame's perspective a better game here for white. Rook on c7 was played. Now queen on f3, rook on f8, king on g2, we have rook on b7, and now h4. You see, we are not rushing into anything here. We are playing simply on improvements of the position. Rook from e to e2, queen on a4 was played. Now b3, we have queen on b4, knight on d3, queen on d6, h5. We are simply improving all of the pieces, also the pawns. Rook on c7, knight on f4, d4. You see, now we have a new position, so we want to create again a blockade against this pawn. Rook on e4, you see, it's a little bit weak now, this pawn, so that's why knight on c6, but now knight on d3, again creating a blocking system. Rook on d8, now rook on c2, rook on b4, knight takes on b4, we have a takes b4, but now very powerful move, rook on d4, and here if the queen takes, of course, then we can take this pawn, we can attack this f7, and now black tried rook, queen on f8, rook takes on d8, queen takes on d8, rook takes on c7, queen takes on c7, and you see it's now move 39, so white had to play many moves in order to get this endgame in which white has a one pawn up situation. But as said, if you have this isolated pawn, be patient, just play first on the blockade, and you see in the continuation of the game, Veselin Topalov could get use of this weakness of this isolated pawn and could grab it and went into this favorable endgame. So as said, I hope you realize these ideas. When we have these positions, when we have the central pawn storm position, backward pawns, isolated pawns, and supported pass pawns, be aware of this possible blockade, of this possible blocking system. You have to do that. If you don't do that, you may get crushed very easily if your opponent connects too many pawns in the center, if your opponent advances this isolated pawn, if your opponent advances maybe the backward pawn, if your opponent advances the supported pass pawn, it could be really deadly. So first you have to play, of course, on the blockade, and then consolidate a little bit and try to get use of your opponent's weaknesses in the continuation of the middle game. Okay, I hope you realize these ideas, and I hope also that you enjoy this video. And meanwhile, you can watch my other basics in chess videos with some other opening principles, mid game strategies, and the end game strategies. And you can also subscribe to my channel if you like the content. Thanks you for watching, guys, and chess is the best, of course.